Are we looking at one another, or are we looking straight ahead to the camera?
Whatever you feel like.
Okay.
Conversation.
Okay.
Greetings, community. This year marks a significant step in our educational series as we embrace a hybrid model for the first time. We are in person and online. For the last few years, we've just done it virtually, and we're just excited to spend time with each other in space, but then to still be able to talk to you out there. This series has always served as an excellent prelude to our upcoming Juneteenth celebration at Roy Wilkins Park on the 19th. We extend our sincere gratitude to your college, where we are today, for their generous hospitality in hosting this important dialogue. I went here, so that's cool. I am Saida Dunstan, the CEO of Elmcor, and I'm honored to be collaborating again with Voice and Assemblymember Alicia Hyman in presenting this series. Following last night's insightful conversation on the business of being Black, owning our own narratives and industries, we now turn to our attention to educational liberation. Tonight's focus is the classroom rebellion, Black-led education. Black educators have historically stood as vanguards, imparting truth, shaping futures, and challenging inequitable systems. The great thing about the educators today, we are going to talk about what diverse work looks like, how we're able to actually take the liberation of the Black experience and infuse it throughout our education. We invite you to join us for this compelling conversation, exploring how these schools have grassroots educators and innovative learning models that are revolutionizing education for diverse young people, talking about Black history, identity, and excellence. Together, we will delve into what it means to challenge conventional systems, honor ancestral wisdom, and cultivate learning environments where our narratives are not only present, but central and prioritized. I am pleased to introduce tonight's powerhouse panel. Sitting to my right is Dr. Tiffany Hicks. She is a compassionate and results-driven educator for over 20 years. Let's give it up for that. Any person dealing with young people for 20 years need to get a shout. She is the principal of PS 160 in Queens, and we are in Queens, in Jamaica, specializing in implementing research-based strategies, academic success, and fostering a school improvement environment for all the young people that she serves. Next to her is Dr. Josephine Van Es, the superintendent. I just want to give that a shout out. Of high schools in South Queens, and so we're really grateful to have her here. She too has multiple years of experience. 19 or 18 is what it says here. How much is it really though?
Say that again.
It's 18 years of experience, but what is it
Going
really?
on my 19th year of experience.
Yeah, because whatever they write in the bio, by the time we speak to them, it's like another 5 years.
Okay.
So just want to make sure that we get that right. So almost 19 years of experience working with young people and elevating herself throughout the process from, being an executive coach, a superintendent. She's an adjunct professor at the doctoral level, and just showing us that education is an area that we should touch at all times and by all people. And then we have the pleasure, it's not just a ladies' conversation. When we talk about education, men are critically important as we talk about the education of young boys. And so we are grateful to have here tonight for the second time in our Juneteenth educational series, which is just proof that people want to come talk to you again, and that's a good thing. We have Dr. Shango Blake. He is nationally, I'll even say at this point, Dr. Blake, internationally known as the hip hop principal. He is the CEO of TRU SK Consultants. He is a much sought after speaker about issues like urban education and pioneering unique collaborations between students, teachers, parents, and community towards creating a sustainable and vibrant academic atmosphere. And I just want to say thank you again for coming to speak to us tonight. And we're gonna just jump right into it. You guys okay with that?
Sure. Yes.
Let's do it. This is just a conversation, but a conversation about a really important topic. Yesterday we talked about money, we talked about entrepreneurship, we talked about just how to be successful and have Black abundance. We talked about, having that conversation. But a lot of that stems on where we start. Where's our foundation and education and how we're doing that. So I just want to ask you guys, what motivated you to get involved in education, to think about diverse educational programs, and how that differs from maybe even the experience you had growing up and what you wanted for young people that looked like you, that might have had some of the same experiences like you. What made you want to be involved in education?
I'll start. Dr. Josephine Yeboah-Van, proud superintendent of Queens South High Schools, and some of the things that motivated me to get into education was first and foremost, I always start with my father. He always communicated to me that do not see life with ceilings, that there are no ceilings but the ones we create for ourselves. And I always wanted to make sure that our students, in particular students that are diverse, understood that within education, within their own abilities, that they don't have to see a life with ceilings. I grew up in South Jamaica, Queens. I'm a product of public schools. And now in being a superintendent of Queens South, right back home to where I grew up, for me it's legacy work. So how are we making sure that our students are always being cultivated to meet the bar and exceed the bar that we want them to achieve? How do we provide opportunities for them to showcase academic excellence? And what does it mean to really cultivate our students? Our mantra at Queens South High Schools is like seeds, what you nurture grows, and we nurture seeds of excellence, and that's exactly what our students are. And so my motivation is always to make sure that our students in our schools feel seen, heard, that their backgrounds are respected while we continue to ensure that they have the tools that they need to persist.
Anyone else?
I would say probably building off of that, within my school community, our motto is work hard, get smart, no excuses. And we really try to push the idea that smart is not something you are, it's something that you get, and the only way you get smart is to be able to work hard. So I approach that in all of the students, you say work hard, and they immediately repeat that, and it really is no excuses, and not excuses not for our parents, not for the community at large, and definitely not for the teachers. So it's really about holding everyone accountable. I am a product of what looks like a community raises a child, so everybody comes together. Education was first, and understanding the importance and the value of education, knowing that without education, nothing else can happen after that. I really want to make sure that all students are able to do that. Prior to entering into the teaching field, I was a caseworker for a foster care agency, so I had to go and visit students, young people whose parents were incarcerated. So one little boy, I drove all the way to Staten Island to do the home visit, and he just wanted me to read to him, and he was in 3rd grade. And I was maybe 20, 21, and I could not understand how a child would be 8 years old and not know how to read. So that was truly my motivation. I came back to the office, and they were like, did you hear about Teaching Fellows? And I'm like, well, what's that? And then I applied, and then, I just moved through the ranks from there. But just understanding that opportunities are there, and if we don't surround and nurture our greatest gifts and our greatest assets, then where is our future? So this year our motto for graduation was from tiny seeds to mighty trees. So today we graduated our kindergartners, and they moved up, and it was like we're laying the seeds and the foundation. And I told my families, take out your calendars, June 18, 2030, I will see you back here for your 5th grade graduation, to let them know that it doesn't stop here. This is just the beginning, and I want to make sure that they all understand that, value that, and hold that date.
Dr. Blake?
Yes, I was sitting here reflecting. For me, education has been a family business. I have to give honor to both my mother and father, Dr. Bessie Blake, former dean of the College of New Rochelle, and Professor James Blake, who's been a long-time professor at Borough Manhattan Community College. Interesting enough, it wasn't that they were in education so that I was destined to go into education, but it was the experience that I had as a young person. I grew up in a neighborhood that was probably one of the most per capita affluent middle class communities in Southeast Queens, and I was in Laurelton. And but in the 80s, when I was kind of like coming of age, it was scourged by the crack epidemic. So the love that I had in my home, the teaching of Black history, the core values that were being expressed in the home, when I walked outside of my house, it was a different reality. And for me, it was hard to wrestle with what I was experiencing in my home based upon, what I was experiencing when I went outside. And then at the time, the schools that I was attending at that time was District 29, and those schools could not compete with District 26. So I was one of those children who were bused to District 26, the Bayside schools, the Little Neck schools. And I remember when we got out of school, we had to get on a bus and go about an hour and a half back to my neighborhood. While the students who lived in the local area, they participated in lacrosse, they participated in rugby, they had all kinds of extracurricular activities, and I was on Hillside and Jamaica Avenue participating in Hunger Games, fights, and all kinds of things of that nature from all the different neighborhoods. And so just to kind of fast forward, I came out of school, came out of college, and I started working in Harlem. Actually, I worked for this organization called Reland Center for Children and Families. It was the County Cullen School on 144th Street in Frederick Douglass. And that organization would grow and be now known as Harlem Children's Zone. So I was one of the first employees of what is now known as Harlem Children's Zone, and that's where I found my passion, that's where I found my love for young people, that's where I found I had a unique ability to connect, and it's one of those situations where, how the saying goes, I didn't call education, education called me.
That's great. I think one of the things that kind of was the connecting thread through everybody's conversation, for me at least, is the old African proverb of it takes a village. It was very clear throughout everyone's conversation that there's a real connection with how caring adults are critically important, whether they're your parents, whether they're people in your community, whether it's that experience I'm sure you had with Jeffrey Canada at the time, because he's a little bit older than you, and so caring adults, even when we're in our young adult ages, the impact that has, because we're constantly being educated, right? And so I want to ask this question, and I'll start with you, Dr. Blake, just because we started from this end, and so we'll start from that direction. Just want to get an idea from your experience and the work that you've done. We talk about, the diversity that's necessary in education. How critical, as we talk about Juneteenth, how critical is the idea of Black history and Black education within the diversification of education for young people, for all young people? What would you say? How critical and how important is that?
It's absolutely critical. I think to teach young people who they are is a life-saving activity, is in fact a liberatory action. I'm so proud of my organization, Black Influencers United, which is at the vanguard for bringing the Black Studies curriculum to all New York City schools. I'll use this example. We hear the term CRSE, and I think Black Studies clearly falls within that definition. But if I was to take a picture of everybody in this room and then put it up on the screen, the first person you will look for is yourself. So when we don't have our children reflected in the curriculum, reflected in the stories, we're literally like ignoring their humanity. And then we ask ourselves, why are they manifesting inhumane behavior? So to be able to represent those stories, represent the diversity of those stories, it's an act of love. And that's the one thing our children are missing. I would go on to say that in terms of a diverse school system, my experience has been that when you allow all children and even adults to participate in something like Black Studies curriculum, it's absolutely eye-opening. I've gotten responses from educators who didn't know the true history of even Juneteenth, right? And so, I'm the hip-hop principal, so I'm going to quote KRS-One, and he says that when one doesn't know about another one's culture, ignorance swarms down like a vulture.
You must learn.
That's
That
right.
is the KRS one. I want to take it a step further, right? Dr. Van Ness, I'm going to come to you on that and kind of build on these building blocks that we're having. And so, you know, we talk about diversity and things like that and Common Core, right? There's something so interesting too about the word common, right? That everything has like the same kind of base. May not always be the case, but tell us, what are you doing to make sure that Common Core education and within your schools are diverse, are able to kind of allow other people's experience to help the educational experience?
Yeah, for sure. Well, in our educational system, we're actually transitioning from Common Core learning standards to the next generation learning standards, right? And there's a critical focus on this element of conceptual learning, critical thinking, and those kind of foundational things of reading, writing, listening, right? And so when we think about the celebration of diversity and when we think about how these standards are embedded in curriculum and taught, right? We get the opportunity to allow our students to read texts in which they are exemplified in, when we are talking about lifting that true diversity in the educational system. We allow them to research, right, and be able to explore the stories that are enriched within their culture, right, and that represent their diversity. And also, when we talk about just culturally responsive pedagogy and standard-based learning, we also have to take into account the vast nature of our stories. It's not just stories of struggle and hardship. It's stories of triumph and excellence, and making sure that as our students are exploring standard-based instruction, grade level texts, that we showcase the kind of plethora of our stories, the plethora of our experiences through our educational objectives, tasks, the resources that we use within our classrooms, and all of that is grounded in standard-based learning, right? We want to make sure that our students leave our schools prepared, right? To be able to compete in the workforce, to take on their post-secondary endeavors, right? And that preparation comes through standard-based instruction, but it also comes with making sure that they are learning, right? The truth about their history, their culture, with respect and pride.
So, Dr. Hicks, we've got another one for you, because we're building here. You spoke earlier, I really appreciate it. You spoke earlier about parents and families and making sure that they knew they were at kindergarten graduation, but see you back here, which is really important. Can you tell us a little bit of how you've cultivated where you are, and I'm sure throughout your career, like cultivated this shared experience, this shared learning experience of how do you make sure that parents feel involved, the community feels involved, that the paras feel as equal as teachers. Like, this is a real thing when you're building community within education. Like, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think, as we're talking about Juneteenth, that is a liberating experience when there's shared power between everyone involved. So can you tell us a little bit what you've done to do shared power?
Okay, shared power. I believe collaboration, first and foremost, is important. Respecting and honoring the talent and the expertise in the building, regardless of title. So once you look past that, it's not about who you are, it's what you can bring to the table. So in interviews, one of the main questions is, what else can you do for the school? What else can you offer to the school? Because I want to know who you are as a person, not only as an educator. As far as with parents, I've learned over my 12 years as a principal, children are the best PR possible. So if I get them excited about what's happening and what's going on in the building, they are going to tell their families, like, no, you have to come because we have to do this. Whether that's through family nights, whether that's through other ways to engage them, and we have to be creative, because I will be honest, sometimes it's a struggle to give parents what they need, but it's not what they want, and they only sometimes come out for the things they want. So we have to be creative and kind of tuck that in so that they understand, like, yes, we can be here during science night, but you're going to learn what it means to make a hypothesis. We can be here for gingerbread night, but you're going to understand that there's math that's involved with building a strong structure. So it's trying to do things like that, and really just leveling the playing field. It really is about exposure. So when Superintendent Von Ness was speaking about, the standards, without exposure and children having these early learning experiences, it's hard to make an inference if I've never done something. So when the teacher's like, oh, close your eyes and imagine you were at the beach, and a student said, well, I've never been to the beach. So it's not that they don't know how to do something, but they can't access that information because they have not had that experience. So trying to bring in things for families and parent workshops, not just the regular reading workshops. We're doing SEL, let's make teas, and there's a formula for that. Let's do aromatherapy, because if you're calm, then the children are going to come here calm, and understanding that the 21st century parent is not the parents that we had when we came to school. So I listen and I do not judge, and I understand, that there are many factors, competing factors, as to why you may be here, why you may not be here, and really being empathetic to those needs where you're trying to balance, do I go to work or do I come to the meeting, but I have to go to work. So understanding that. So I think if we just all approach this with a level of understanding, not assuming anything, again, because of a title. Some of my paras lead classes. They're doing bucket drumming, teaching Spanish, doing art classes. They're doing things, but I give them the honor and the space to say we're all teachers. We're all educators, and I try to treat everyone as such within my school.
So the tech folks told me to stop moving the mic. So I'm going to move a little bit closer. Don't smile, that's what you said. Just so you folks at home don't know, but the tech people are pointing at me. But I said we having a conversation. We at home, so I don't fake the funk no other time. So I'm gonna say it here that she told me I need to stop moving the mic. So I want to kind of talk a little bit. Obviously, right now we're sitting at York College, and in the front there was some early voting going on, and so. It is Juneteenth. We are talking about liberation, no matter how we cut it. I'm curious, not questions sent before to them, so, but I know you guys can handle. How do we help young people who look like us within our districts? This is not a political question at all. It's really about civic engagement. How do we have young people, especially as we talk about Juneteenth and the liberation, and we talk about education, and the fact that young people spend most of their days with educators before they get back home and do whatever else they're going to do. So how do we get, and this is for all of you guys, how do we get in our schools, in our spaces, this idea of civic engagement being a form of liberation, specifically for young people of color?
Recently, we had many of our students participate in Project Soapbox, a great opportunity for students to explore topics and issues from their community that matter most to them. And these students are trained up to not only communicate their concern, but to also talk about potential solutions, right? And the more opportunities, and we actually had, of the 10 students that made it to the main stage, we had 3 students from Queens South High Schools, and this is the citywide, make it to the main stage, and so I'm super proud of that work, right, that we're doing across our schools. But these opportunities for students to share their thoughts, their concerns, their ideas, and their solutions in a real way is critically important. Just today, I had my principal retreat, and our Scholars Collective, another group of students who serve as my student advisory, came to present what was their action research around the need for peer mentors. And they talked about the initiative that we want to see across our high schools called Guiding Lights. And they talked about the need, right, of students being able to be supported by other students that not only look like them, that could support them through their high school journey. And these opportunities, Soapbox, peer mentoring, We have made sure that our schools are preparing students for the seal of civic readiness, right? And it requires them to engage in these action research topics that really help to push forward the agenda of some of these concerns of poverty, of gun violence, of all these things that they are both experiencing and seeing, right? On their television every day, exploring the solutions for those things. And so really being able to provide the platform for our students to share their concerns, their thoughts, and their solutions, providing opportunities for them to be developed through peer mentoring, and really being able to have them engage in those project-based learning opportunities that allow them to explore the topic, but also be able to be part of the solution.
I would agree with everything that was just said. Only thing I would add to is it's about helping our students understand how something goes from advocacy to implementation, right? Like the entire process, soup to nuts, and then undergirding that with the teaching of history. So let's use Juneteenth as an example. You know, what happened after the slaves were freed? We went into the Reconstruction era. And what happened as a result of that? In the South, there was more congressmen, more governors, greater political power. In fact, people don't know this, or a lot of people don't realize that the Ku Klux Klan did not emerge during slavery. They emerged during the Reconstruction era to beat black people back out of power. So helping students understand it in a historical context, right? And then drawing inference from that to what they're experiencing today. How do you have an agenda? How do you speak to an agenda? And I think that there's no more qualified group than black educators who can serve as an example. BU, we show by example, right? We are an organization that has a 7-point actionable item agenda. We are political. We put our agenda before elected officials and say things like, would you support the Black Studies curriculum? Would you support the increase of NWBEs? There's no reason why we can't bring students into that same fold and get them to start really coalescing, as Dr. Van Ness said, around what things are important to them. And then how do they go to develop an agenda as it relates to that? And then how do they really be in it for the long haul? Because young people are impatient, right? To actually see what they advocated for come into fruition.
I think also we need to provide our young people with the structure. And once they have the structure, we need to step back. As educators, we tend to want to control everything like you're afraid. No, they're not going to, but we have to step back because what we see as problems, they see as solutions. And they understanding that they have a mind, they have a voice, but sometimes they're not allowed to speak or given that freedom. I think the most engaged my students have ever been is during PBL weeks. One year we did Big Idea Week, and there was a problem, they had to create a product. And some of my rowdiest babies were the quietest and the most focused in the hallways, and because they were able to create and have these ideas. So when you step back and just listen, and understand, like, what is it that you want? What does school look like for you? What should it feel like? Then by the time they get to high school, these things aren't things that they first have to start teaching again. So I'm really a big advocate of starting things in the elementary schools, because if we don't catch them there, then you're playing catch up for their entire life. You're trying to motivate them in 6th grade when we're not could have motivated them in 2nd grade, and then they get to middle school and they're already ready to take on some of those challenges. So I think, again, it really is about providing them the structure. This is how things go. Yes, they are, impatient, and we have to understand how they learn. My digital babies, my kindergarten, they do not sit still because they're used to pressing a button and stars and things happen and fly, and now we're like, no, sit and read. There's no playtime. There's really a big transition from pre-K to kindergarten. Is getting the parents to understand that. There is no center time. They're not getting a snack. There is no nap. They're, expected to sit for now 20 minutes to listen to something, take it in, and then go back and now apply it. So if we are able to do this through play or structured play or ways that students can engage, explore, and create, then I think we would make for a better society.
So we've talked about the young people, we've talked about history, we've talked about all the things. I want to talk about aspiring leaders. You guys are sitting here looking very good, I might add. and hopefully looking very good to people who are aspiring to maybe sit where you sit. As I stated, I'm the CEO of Elmcor. We're the oldest Black founded, Black-led nonprofit in Queens. We turned 60 this year. One of the things that I hope all the time is that I'm inspiring other people to want my seat, right? And so a part of it is you guys sit in great seats that hopefully other people are aspiring to, but I'm quite sure didn't come easy, had its own challenges and barriers. People who look like us have very unique challenges. Here's your opportunity to talk to someone that you want to work in your school, to work in your district, to help you with your advocacy and building other Black educators for BU. What would you say to them? How would you inspire them to say, watching you today, today's the day I want to be an educator?
You want me to take that? Yeah. I would say that to step into leadership in any role, AP, principal, superintendent, to be an organizational leader is a position that comes with a lot of criticism. There'll be times where you're doing the best and your best will be interpreted wrong. There will be times where you will be talked about and arrows will be shot at your back. Now this may not sound like inspiring, right?
But it's honest.
But it is the most important work that you will ever do. And if you have I would say, a marathon mindset, then you will see the legacy of your work come back to you. And you will know that you impacted countless of lives. So it's not for the weak, it's not for the faint, but it's very, very special person to step into that leadership role. And you got to see yourself as that special person. You're not a person who's leading through titles and positions. You're leading through building community, through transformational leadership practices, through being concerned about the people who you are leading, you know, and it's okay to be human. You're gonna go home and you're gonna curse some people out in your mind. But you get up, you come back, and you do it again because your commitment to young people and your knowledge of how important it is for you to sit in the seat that you're sitting in is critically important to the success of our children. I want to tap my friend here. You know, talking about legacy work. When I was principal of school right out here, IS 109 in Queens Village, I saw this young educator who I saw had tremendous potential. And she came to my school looking for a position, and I had to hold the position because you know how it is with the state, something's not ready or what have you. And I held it because I held a belief that this person was going to do a great work at my school. Well, unbeknownst to me, this person would go on to be the superintendent of South East Queens high schools. And when you talk about legacy work and you talk about doing that work, you know, she's often heard me say this, that there's a scripture that says, cast your bread amongst the waters and many days it shall return to you. So seeing her do the work that she does validates the sacrifices that I made, allows that bread to come back to me, but also puts me in a position where now I'm seeking advice and guidance from her and collaborating with her. So you see how things come back full circle. This is the work that we do. It's community building, it's transformational, it's sacrifice, it's real. And if you want a real experience, step into leadership.
And before we move on to the other two answering, I need us in here to give that a round of applause. And those at home, because that's real. You know, when you get places, you want someone to see you. That's what we talked about earlier, young people being seen. We want people to see us.
And I want to add on to that, right? Because Dr. Blake, at that time, Principal Blake, right, of 109, saw something in me, right? And so one of my pieces of advice is to be a mentor and seek a mentor, right? one of the people often ask me, how did I get to this place in this time of my life? It's because I stand on the shoulders of greats, people who helped to cultivate me, support me, provided me real advice, guided me through my journey as both a young woman of color in this work, as well as an educator. And as I have been mentored and coached, I also mentor and coach to make sure that I'm passing that forward and I'm helping to cultivate other leaders to rise to the levels to which they so want to rise to. The other thing that I would say as a piece of advice, understand your purpose in this work, right? This, as Dr. Blake said, this is beyond the title. When I entered this role as superintendent, I didn't enter it with that being the very thing that I saw in front of me. I said, how do I serve the very community that helped to raise me, right? What is the legacy that I get to contribute to, right? And coming back to Queens South High Schools and supporting young people that look like me and look like the beautiful diversity that is Queens, right? And making sure that my core purpose was to make sure that I cultivated change and progress from a place of high expectations, accountability, and love, right? Which brings me to my last piece. The biggest piece of advice is to, as you understand your purpose, as you are a mentor and you seek mentorship, enjoy. Find joy in this work, right? Our children are beautiful, bold, and bright. This work is complex, but we are building what is the future. Educators have the most critical role, right, within a profession, which is to build other professionals and other entrepreneurs and musicians and all the things that come out of the educational system. Find joy in that. Find the pride in that. Understand why you've come to this work and continue to be the motivating variable that allows people to want to do this work.
And I will finish off by saying, know that one, it is an honor and a blessing to be selected and to be chosen to do this work. Because this is life work. It's not just a job where you go, you move papers. This is life work where you have direct impact on the lives and the trajectory of students. I know that in this role, there was a concept that I'd heard at a conference, mirrors and windows. So I am very aware that for some children, I serve as a mirror. I am somebody that they can see that looks like them, and maybe this is aspiring to what they want to do. And for some, it's a window that they can look out and say, I can do that as well. And I really, in all of the partnerships that I bring into the school, I really pride myself again on this exposure, focusing and working with MWBEs, because I want students to see the opportunities that lie outside of the neighborhood. A lot of my families within my school 160, the moms have went there, grandma went there, so it's generational. So I always say parents, everybody wants better for their child, but it's my job to show you what better actually is, and so I have to actualize that so that they understand it's more to it than just A. There's A, B, C, and D, and there are other ways to get there. So if you are at home and in here wondering, like, is this it? Is this what I want to do? Understand that it's a calling. And if you're listening to yourself and you're surrounding yourself with people that want to help elevate you, because there will always be naysayers in the group, as have been said, but you have to surround yourself with a community that thinks like you and wants to push you to do more and do better than just take the leap. Because schools are hiring, small class size, everybody needs a teacher now. So, join the fight, and that is how we build legacy, as we've been talking about today. That is how we have long-lasting impact. But if our voices are not in the room and our children do not hear our voices, then they will be subject to listening to anything.
This is a great conversation. Would you guys agree? Yes. Come on. I'm in community. So, as a nonprofit leader, as a woman as a black woman running the oldest black nonprofit in Queens, we talk about money all the time where I'm at. Funding is always a conversation. And all of you guys sit in spaces where money matters. I always say you can't solve poverty with poverty. Don't give us less and ask us to do more. That is a real conversation. You guys are talking about robust programming, thought leadership, just things that should be replicable, right? They should be done not just in Queens, not just in South Queens, but all throughout New York, all throughout the state, all throughout the nation. I always say I'm a global human being because I'm of Caribbean descent, so I'm a global person because I'm here, right? And so throughout the world, we should be having conversations like this about how we create this type of environment that you guys have so eloquently spoken about tonight. But it needs to be funded. It needs money. So can you talk a little bit about maybe some partnerships that you've had or you would like to have? The camera's there too. I told you I go for money. We'll send this YouTube out to many people afterwards, right? But how can people invest, right? That's really the question. How can people invest in the education of all young people, for vulnerable peoples? How do we invest, and how do we invest to make sure that this conversation continues? Because we're building things that are replicable and should be continued over and over and over again. One of the things about why at UMCOR we scream we're the oldest black founded nonprofit is not because we don't have anything else to say. It's because we want people to see a model that has been tried and true and should be funded. And you guys are talking about things that should be funded. So tell me and tell them why it should be funded, what are the reasons why it should be funded, and if you feel really crazy, how much funding you want?
Well, I can speak from the school level. A lot of it is what is a priority, and understanding that the needs of my school community, and not just within the school, thinking about the whole community, that's a priority. So partnering with food banks. We partnered with the Gatton Group, so at one point we were doing food deliveries, and I'm driving around South Jamaica delivering food packages to families because I knew that was a need. Focusing on early literacy. So I do have a partnership with South Jamaica Reads. That gets funded first. There is a part that I have to pay for with the school, and off the top that comes because that brings me not only human capital, but how we're all saying boots on the ground. Like sometimes that's what you just need, more bodies, because I can't pay every teacher per session to stay, but if I can get volunteers and people to come in and do some of this one-on-one reading with the child and intervention, because sometimes that's all it takes to close that gap. They just need more time and more people. But I'm understanding of what I'm already asking my teachers to do, what I'm already asking the parents to do, how many programs we're running, and then again, the funding does run out. So sometimes it really is just about just showing up and being there and providing that type of assistance. Partnering again, this year Sit and Spin. We did students learn how to play table tennis. We did a whole week with Hidden Gems. Students learn archery from pre-K all the way through 5th grade. Roller skating because they're not outside. My school was going under, we had an extension, so we did not have a park since 2020. So we will now have a park opening in September 2025, but I had to get really creative about what was I gonna do for recess because they thought going to the auditorium was recess. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, I failed you children because you're not able to be outside to play. So bringing in organizations to teach them how to play because they don't play anymore. They wanna play video games and not play the regular games that we're playing. And then as a District 28 community, we're all partnering and doing a lot of different things with the MBK initiatives, MBSK. So again, one is just partnerships. Two, thinking of what's needed. There's a lot of food insecurity in South Jamaica, Queens. So figuring out how can we bring that in to help our families. My kids come to school hungry. My day is shot from the beginning. Thinking about after-school programs, affordable after-school programs. I do not ask my families to pay for rarely anything. If we can fund trips for students to be able to just so that everybody has the chance to go. So now when we say write a story about a time, you have a story to write about a time that you went and did something. Yes, Tiffany Hicks, T Hicks 2 at schools.nyc.gov. Just bring it on in and it's okay.
Yeah. I want to go back to what you said around the priorities, right? And one of the things I always communicate is, let's start first with what we have, right? So in our New York City public schools, there's a lot of funding sources that I know as a high school superintendent, I have been able to both advocate for and receive. One of my biggest priorities is making sure that students have pathway development, post-secondary pathway development. And we've been fortunate to be funded, have schools be funded as future-ready schools, schools who get allocations for this particular work. Training, development, money for teachers, and to get these CTE credentials, right? And so that's one pot of money. We've also been very fortunate to partner with our elected officials. I have a STEM in the South initiative. We have built innovation sites in which students across my 3 districts can go to these innovation sites and get career-connected learning. So they're having courses in digital media production, IT software, culinary arts, droning, robotics, and they can go to any AI fundamentals, and they could go to any one of these 13 sites after school, get the course credit and the certification. And our elected officials have been a partner in that work in making sure that they are funding facility upgrades to house these programs, and also the technology resources that are critically important for the CTE STEM-based programs. And then, we have had amazing community-based organizations pour into our programs. Small businesses, MWBEs that have really said, I see you doing this MBK work, this MSK work, this work around STEM in the South. How can we partner? And so the call to action is, how do we continue to build more programs? We could never have enough resources for students, right? And as we are asking for resources, how do we also create an internal ecosystem of what we have with the people that have it? So the current 13 sites are funded and supported by my principals to then support other schools and students, right? But there has to be a belief in that vision and mission, that collective vision and mission. So as we talk about funding and resources, and as we go through economic crises and things of that nature, what's the ecosystem we're building so that we can persist and sustain no matter what's happening with money, right? How are we using the village to continue to move the work forward? And so as we ask for partners, also how do we build that ecosystem to continue the sustainability of our programs and the progress of our schools?
Dr. Blake, do you want to tackle the funding question, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A?
Sure. First of all, I just want to say, as a fellow nonprofit, I feel your pain. And I would be remiss if I didn't shout out Lucius Benson. My father and him were best friends. So I know the history of Elm Corps, right? I think that we have to look at this from a historical lens, right? There was a book that I think is relevant to this day. Actually, it was one part 2 by a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Kozol. The first book was called The Deaf at an Early Age, and it looked at the funding formula and what children in urban school environments were not getting. And then in the 90s, he followed up that book with a book called Savage Inequalities, which was actually used by organizations like the Alliance for Quality Education, Sister Zakiya and her work, who advocated for the campaign of fiscal equity, and who continue to advocate, because now they're looking at what is called Formula A funding, which means that when they finally got the money that they needed, it took so long that the money didn't have the same value that it would have had if they got it when they were supposed to. So it's just like really important to understand how to advocate with our legislators, how to push for change, and how to kind of like check people's moral compass. Because, you know, Dr. Vaness said, you know, it's never enough, right? This money is critical to the development of our children, and the reality is that schools in urban environments do not get the same funding as schools in other places, and so it's an equity issue. I want to say that for us, BU, I want to give credit to Adrian Adams, Speaker Adams, and former City Council member Donique Miller, because they were the ones when we came together and formed the school called the EEAPC, Education Equity Action Plan Coalition. This was the group that said to the City Council, we need a Black Studies curriculum and we need funding for it. And they were shocked that there was no Black Studies curriculum in the New York City public schools. So sometimes it's just about getting people in the room, but they funded that curriculum up to the tunes of $27 million. And that's how we were able to get it to the point where it's now available in all schools. So I always say it takes a bit of, I call it the push-pull, right? Sometimes you need people externally pushing, and then you need strategic people like superintendents and principals who can pull the lever inside to make things happen that actually then results in real funding opportunities for our children and kind of deals with the equity gap.
So we're gonna get ready to do some Q&A. I believe we have some questions from online. I do wanna give a special shout out again to Assembly Member Alicia Hyman, who has been a partner in this process, but more importantly, as we're talking about education, is now the co-chair of education on the state level, right, for the legislators. And I think that that is something we have to be very happy for, because she's also the legislator that helped the legislation of the recognition of Juneteenth. So that's, I don't know if they know, but I know that's a powerful move to have the person who said recognize Juneteenth now be talking about education throughout the state. So special shout out to the Assembly member again. So questions?
Yes, so the panel started to speak about career development, equity, and our schools not getting the same funding as other districts. As AI becomes more integrated in classrooms and learning tools, how can we ensure that Black youth not only benefit equitably from these technologies, but are also empowered to become creators and leaders in AI rather than just consumers?
The AI question.
Yeah. You know, that is a great question. One of our innovation sites is an AI fundamental site. And what students learn in that site is how to be prompt engineers, right? And they take what is the certification exam. Shout out to Principal Moses Ojeda of Thomas Edison High School, one of our largest and best known CTE schools in Queens, who not only provides that as a site, he teaches the site, right? And so really, to your point, it's not about just the understanding of AI, but really being able to develop students, to develop AI tools through coding, but also to be able to navigate it through that prompt engineering work, right? And so really being able to provide both curriculum, the supports, making sure that we're training up teachers, right? That teachers have the capacity to understand the benefits and the use of AI in our classrooms, to use it with, and teach children and students how to use it with integrity, right? Having that capacity being built to then be able to make sure that we build that capacity of young people is critically important. And that's one of the ways that we've started that work. We've made it one of our STEM in the South innovation sites, where students are learning not only how to use it, right, but what goes into building these AI tools, critically important.
I just want to add to that and say, you know, there's a saying that they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, that's a lie, because I'm an old dog and I'm learning new tricks, and that is AI. And what I would say to our teaching, our teachers and our paras and our educators of a certain age, don't be afraid to teach yourself and take a course, which I'm doing right now, in AI, so that you can be able to really facilitate learning for the children. Because I would go on to say that these children, they are really dynamic in terms of like adapting to the new technologies, from a both consumer standpoint and a content creator standpoint. But if the students are engaged in this work that's moving like this, but the adults aren't, then there's going to be a gap. So I would encourage all, educators, especially my age group. I'm not telling you my age, but I'm just going to say that, don't be afraid to learn AI yourself.
Dr. Hicks, you want to?
No, I completely agree. I just, with our ILT, knowing that the teachers were using AI, after a while you can tell what, was this a lesson plan you created or this was AI assisted? And again, understanding that you're creating a lot of plans for a diverse group of students in the classroom. So there are times when it is easier and you're able to get resources at your fingertips to say, how can I differentiate this lesson for this group of students that may not speak English? What can I do? And it does provide some support. So we had the ILT team members who were using it responsibly then present to all of the teachers, how to use AI for ENL students, how to use AI in special education, and coming up like with DFID, and you can say, I need a story focusing on these words that they were learning in foundations, have this repeated that you would not be able to just find immediately. So once we educate the teachers, how Dr. Blake said, and letting them know like this is a tool that we need to teach our students to be able to use, and thinking of prompt engineering, I'm like, that would help them come up and create better questions. So maybe they are not up to the coding aspect of it yet, but they do know how to ask a question and go a little bit deeper with it. So I think if we teach them in school how to use it responsibly, then we're not dependent on having them unlearn what they've learned the wrong way online, or finding little cheat codes. So again, we have to adapt to them. So again, that adaptive leadership, and for the teachers, they want to do it one way. We have to meet students where they are, because they are going to fly above our heads and we'll be sitting there like stuck. So again, the same way, provide the structure, step back and listen.
This has been wonderful. Just want to thank the panel again, Dr. Hicks, Dr. Van Ness, and Dr. Blake. Can I be like an honorary doctorate? Because I don't know how that works, just like through osmosis, I'll be Dr. Dunstan. But I mean,
Go for it.
it's been said to me before, and I've had to correct it. I was like, I didn't do the actual work. Don't give it to
Picking it
me.
over you.
But I just want to say thank you for this conversation, and a very genuine thank you for one thing in particular. Tomorrow, Encore, we have a preschool. It is the Rising Scholars Preschool. When we opened it, we really wanted it to be a social justice preschool. It's really what we wrote in. And it's in District 29. It's in the Family Life Center. But what's giving me life right now, as I prepare for tomorrow's preschool graduation, is that you guys are in the mix of what the rest of their future looks like. And so it's really good to know that there's little people in the same district that you guys grew up in, that you work in, that you are leading in, that they'll have you. And that really was just something that I have to say to you sincerely from my heart. It really gives me a lot of pleasure to know that they will be in your hands in some way. And so I want to thank everyone again for this conversation. And just to thread what we've been doing, yesterday was about economic liberation. Today was about educational liberation. And tomorrow we're going to be talking about the physical liberation of our people behind the wall. And so tomorrow the conversation is the continued fight for justice, reform, and second chances. And just so we understand what liberation means for us, we talk about Juneteenth. As we talk about economic empowerment and then education, and talking about freeing human beings again, as we talk about Juneteenth, is that we are the solution. We are the actual people who are going to get this done. Yesterday we talked about abundance in funds. Today we talked about education. The reason why I asked about funding is that we have to fund ourselves.
Right.
So we had a lot of powerful entrepreneurs yesterday talking about millions of dollars. And I'm speaking to our people from yesterday, for this group here. Our educators need the funding so that we can continue to stop this prison the school to prison pipeline. So if we can take those who had the money yesterday, fund the educators of today, we will stop that continues future of our people behind the wall. It's been a wonderful conversation. I just want to thank again. And Tanisha Morrison from Voice, who walked out of here, has been a partner throughout this process and has worked very hard and continues to work hard for this festival that we have, Juneteenth, Roy Wilkins Park. This